Utah, 1873. A small group of cowboys drove their herd north through the red canyons before winter closed the trails. The land was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just dust and hoofbeats. Then, at night, voices began calling their names from the dark, familiar voices that shouldn't have been there. By the time they understood what was following them, it had already learned how to sound human. So before we continue, please make sure you subscribe and leave a like to support the channel. Thanks. We pushed north across the broken country between Cedar Mesa and the Green River in October of 1873. The sky held no clouds, and the air had that dry bite that shows up after harvest. Dust lifted off the hooves and settled on our tongues and teeth. We had 83 head, lean steers from a San Juan outfit, and a deadline at the rail stop before the first hard freeze. Caleb was trail boss, quiet, tall, never wasted a word. Old Tom scouted ahead with a glass and a slow mule that never stumbled. Jesse rode the point with a twitch that showed in his jaw when he got nervous. Miguel drove the chuck wagon and kept coffee going whether we wanted it or not. Ephraim was young, good seat, good with knots, still new to trouble. I kept tally and rode flank, kept an eye on stragglers and a hand on the Winchester across the saddle. The ground was long shelves of sandstone and low sage with thin soil. The herd moved steady in daylight and bunched up at dusk. Water meant shallow pools under ledges or a seep in a shaded fold. We planned our camp by those places, and we counted each mile against the cattle's weight and feet. A trader down near the river told us to keep our mouths shut at night in this stretch and gave us a look that skipped past talk. He said not to whistle. He said not to call a name when the dark came in close. He said to be out of Comb Ridge by the third evening. Caleb thanked him and moved on. By the second day I noticed the silence. No distant bird calls, no frogs at the little water we found. Mule deer kept their distance and turned away instead of freezing to study us. A coyote crossed a dry wash ahead of us and stopped, and I saw its head turn and then keep turning past a normal angle. It dropped behind a boulder and did not come up again. Old Tom watched the spot for a full minute and then touched his hat brim against the sun. "We keep the pace," he said, and set his mule forward. We made camp under an overhang that faced east. Miguel boiled beans and cut salt pork. The coffee had a harsh edge that stayed on the breath. Caleb set the watches. Me and Ephraim, then Jesse, then Old Tom until dawn. No singing, no talk after full dark. No fire bigger than the pot needed. The cattle shuffled and settled, hoof scuff, low breath. The ridge above us looked clean and honest in the last light, but I kept checking it without meaning to. Near midnight, a sound came out of the wash. It carried clear in the dry air, the way a small thing can carry when there is nothing else to block it. "Jesse," it said, the tone flat and careful, the way a man who does not know your name tries it for the first time. I sat up. Ephraim, on the far end of our watch, lifted his head. He looked at me. I shook mine. The sound came again, the same pitch, the same speed. "Jesse." No branch break, no foot drag, just that word. Jesse raised on an elbow inside his blanket and whispered a curse. Caleb's hand came up from his bedroll and he pressed two fingers together for silence. The sound quit. At dawn, we found a print near the seep where the cattle drank. The edges were sharp in the damp patch. At first pass, it looked like a coyote. Longer toes, narrow pad. 6 strides later, it changed into a human barefoot on hard ground, then back to coyote in the silt near a cottonwood root. Old Tom traced the line with the tip of his glove and did not touch the marks. "It knows our pace," he said. "It is not hungry yet." He stood and looked at Caleb. Caleb said, "We keep moving." He did not look at the ridge. By late morning, we lost a calf. I counted and counted again and came up short. I took Ephraim and tracked back. We found the calf downstream from the seep under a shelf of rock with brush dragged over it. The hide was cut with a clean tool from throat to belly and rolled back, no blood on the ground. The bones were there and white, the organs were gone. The head was turned sideways and the tongue was taken. Flies should have covered the place by noon, but there were none. Ephraim's hands shook so much he had to grip both reins in one fist to stop it. "We should tell Caleb," he said. "We will," I said. "But first we cover it." We pulled the hide back and dragged stones over the body until the bones were buried. The brush we put back on top had a smell that got into the skin, sharp and old, not rot, not musk, something thin and metallic that stayed in the nose. When we rode into camp with the news, Miguel crossed himself and checked the coffee. Jesse spat into the dust and missed. "Coyote," he said, "or men." Old Tom shook his head once. "A man leaves boot marks when he works that long," he said. "Boots don't vanish in hard ground." Caleb cut off the talk. "We do not spread this," he said. "We do not say the name of it. We change our route and make speed." He pointed us east of the plan, down a shallow draw that would take us toward Butler Wash and away from the open flats. That night the wind rose and then shut down again, quick, as if a door had opened and closed. I took second watch alone so Ephraim could sleep. I walked the line between the herd and the camp and watched the ridge. The stars were cold points and steady. My breath showed for a moment and then thinned out. I heard small stones click together above the camp. I turned and saw a shape beside a juniper. It stood low at first and then unfolded into a taller stance. The limbs moved too smooth, with no start and stop. The head turned toward me and did not tilt. The eyes reflected the faint light and did not blink. I lifted the rifle and set the front sight on the center of the chest and did not fire. It stayed still for a count of 10 and then lowered behind the rock and did not appear again. I walked to the spot at daylight and found no tracks on the rock and a single bare footprint in dust that showed a missing toe. In the morning the herd had drifted a dozen yards, though our ropes held. The knots had not slipped. The stakes were still set. The rope itself had coil marks at intervals, as if a hand had picked it up, weighed it, set it down, and then done that again across the length. Strand fibers had dark hair caught in them, coarse, not from a steer, not from a horse. Miguel would not touch it. Old Tom dug a small hole and pushed the hair in with a stick and covered it. He said nothing during the work and would not meet our eyes. We started to argue at noon. Jesse wanted to turn south and lose the contract. "Not worth it," he said. "The buyer can get fat beef next spring. He can wait." Caleb stood with his thumbs on his belt and listened, and then said, "We finish." He pointed to the sky. 2 days more if we cut through the wash. Water ahead. After that it is open and clean to the river. We will not return through the same ground, Old Tom said. We should not use our names after dark. He looked at each of us. If you hear your name, do not answer. If you hear a child, do not answer. If you hear an animal say a word, do not answer. Miguel swallowed and said he would keep the coffee ready by dusk and then bank the coals under sand. We made good miles in the afternoon. Sand flats gave way to shelves that clattered under the cattle. The sun moved to our right and then fell behind the ridges. We passed a cairn I had built at noon to mark a cut in the rock. Stones were taken off and laid in a line toward a narrow gap, not the way we planned. On top of the last stone sat a dead raven with the breast opened and empty. The wings were spread. No ants touched it. Ephraim breathed through his mouth and stared straight forward after that. We did not rebuild the cairn. We did not speak. Before dusk, we crossed fresh marks on a low wall. Lines scratched with a sharp point, not old carvings, not deep. A man could have made them in a minute if he had a tool and no care for his hands. The marks followed our path and then split, one set running ahead of us, one set dropping into the wash behind. Old Tom looked tired when he saw that. "It wants us to move this way," he said. Caleb said, "Then we camp on the flat instead." And he pushed the herd out of the wash and onto a hardpan bench where we could see both approaches. We set the herd tight and kept the fire small. The smell in the air changed, a thin, sour thread that came and went at the edge of breath. Jesse checked his revolver. Ephraim stretched a new rope and tied it off to 2 solid rocks and put his bedroll in the middle of the line. Miguel poured coffee into tin cups and handed them around with steady hands. Caleb said, "No one leaves the circle. If you are called, you do not move." He looked straight at me. "If you see it, you do not shoot unless it comes inside the herd." I nodded, though every part of me wanted to test the rifle and hear the sound. The sun slid away and left the bench in a dull gray. The cattle stamped and then stood quiet. The dark pressed in close but did not hide the land. We waited. A voice rose from the wash, soft at first, sounding like Ephraim and using my name. "Come here," it said. Then it repeated the words with a small change that missed the shape of them. I did not move. The voice tried again with Miguel's tone and failed at where to place the breath. It moved along the edge of the bench and paced us. The cattle bunched. My mouth felt dry and useless. I tried to swallow and could not. The voice stopped. Stones clicked together. A moment later, something passed behind the chuck wagon and the mules leaned away from their traces with their eyes wide and their ears flat. Caleb raised a hand and held it in the air, and we waited for the next sound. The sound did not return. A thin scrape traveled along the ground near the rope. I raised the rifle and waited until my arms started to ache. Old Tom stood without a sound and moved 2 steps to his left. He held up his palm. I followed his gaze. On the far side of the herd, a shape rose from the ground beside a cow and matched its height. It held still in that posture for a long time, then shifted into a crouch. The cow stamped once and stilled. The shape glided between 2 steers without touching them. I could not make out edges. It looked like a blur in the low light, not a shadow, not a man. My teeth hurt from clenching them. Caleb whispered, "Hold." Jesse's breath came fast and shallow. Ephraim gripped his rope with both hands and kept his feet planted. The shape stopped near the center of the herd. A soft sound came from it, the rough neck rattle a calf makes when it stands for the first time. 3 cows turned their heads and listened. The shape made the sound again and then changed it into something closer to a woman's voice. Then a child's laugh, then the cry of a hawk. None of it sounded right. It was like hearing the right notes on the wrong instrument. The steers shifted, hooves scuffed. I sighted on the space between 2 animals and tried to find a target in the gap. There was nothing solid to put the sight on. It moved back out of the herd as if satisfied. It passed the chuck wagon and brushed the wheel. The wagon creaked as if pushed. Miguel froze. The mules laid back their ears and bared their teeth at it. It paused and then stood up straight in a way that made the mules flinch. I felt a heat rise in my neck and had to swallow again. It turned its head toward us without stepping closer. Then it lowered and slid into the wash. Caleb let out a breath. "No one speaks," he said. "No one fires without my word." He pointed at the rope where Ephraim stood. "You keep that line tight." Ephraim nodded. He had sweat on his face despite the cold. The wind lifted for a moment and dropped again. We kept our places until dawn. The sky lightened and showed the wash and the low benches beyond. The ground near the wagon held prints that shifted shape every few steps. In the dust near the wheel sat a clear mark of a hand with long fingers splayed wide. The thumb pointed the wrong way. I squatted and studied it. The palm showed lines like a person's hand, but the spacing was off. The size matched mine. I pressed my own hand near it and held it there long enough to feel the heat leave my skin. I stood and rubbed my palm on my pants. Miguel would not come close to the mark. He set coffee on the coals with his head down. We checked the herd. 1 animal had a cut along the side. It was clean and shallow. The hide peeled back at the edge like it had been tested and then pressed back into place. No blood on the ground under it. The steer shivered but stood calm. Caleb ran his fingers along the cut, then wiped them on his sleeve. "We move," he said. "Pack fast." His tone carried more weight than before. No one argued. We struck camp in minutes. Jesse kept looking behind us. He touched the back of his neck and then the handle of his revolver and then the neck again, as if checking for a bite. Old Tom walked to the low wall where we had seen the scratches and studied the line. New marks had been added in the night. They looked like tracks drawn with purpose, as if a map had been made to show where to drive us. He called Caleb over. They stood a long time. Then Caleb pointed north. "We cut the route here," he said. "No wash travel, hard ground only. Keep the herd tight." The sun climbed. The day stayed cool. We moved over rock and crusted soil where prints would not hold. I liked the feel of that under the horse. The cattle did not. They stumbled and slowed. I rode to the rear and prodded 2 stragglers forward. A high call sounded from ahead like a person trying to copy a hawk without breath in the right place. We kept going. My throat felt raw from the air and the grip of fear that had not let up since last night. At mid-morning, we found a small spring under a ledge that old Tom knew. He said we would water quick and keep going. The pool looked clear and safe. Jesse crouched to scoop some in his hat. Old Tom yanked him back by the collar. "Wait," he said. He took a stick and skimmed it across the top. Strands of hair rose to the surface. They swirled in a ring. Some of it was calf hair. Some of it was long and black and coarse. None of it belonged in that pool. Miguel turned and spit and wiped his mouth. Nobody spoke for a few breaths. Caleb said, "No water here." We pushed the herd away without letting any of them drink. They bawled and stomped until we cleared the ledge. The terrain narrowed into a pass between 2 mounds. The stone on both sides held old pits and pockets. I did not like going through a throat like that, but the detour around would have taken half a day and more water than we had. Caleb signaled to push through at a trot. The cattle squeezed and surged, dust rising and drifting back on our faces. I covered my mouth with a bandana. A sound started inside the stone to my left. It was not a voice. It was a scraping rhythm like bone on bone. It followed us along the pass and kept time with the herd. It made the hair on my arms rise. Ephraim's horse shied and hit the flank rope. He hauled it back under control with both hands. When we cleared the throat, the sound stopped. We rested on the far side. I took a short walk to calm my legs. I found a place where the ground had been brushed with a bundle of sticks. Marks of that brushing led from the pass to a flat shelf and ended there. On the shelf sat 3 piles of small stones. Each pile had a twist of rawhide on top tied in a simple knot. Each rawhide piece held a fresh drop of blood in the center. The blood had not spread. It sat thick like jelly. I felt cold in my chest. I called Caleb and Old Tom. They studied the piles. Caleb said, "Leave them." Old Tom said, "It counts us." Jesse said, "It's wasting time trying to scare us," but his voice wavered. We moved again. The cattle lagged. The silence thickened. Even the dust seemed to fall without a sound. In the mid-afternoon, we reached a broad, open flat. Far across it stood a single cottonwood with a split trunk. Caleb said we would camp near that tree and set out at first light. No one wanted to be here after dark, but the herd needed a stand and we needed a plan. While Miguel built a small fire, I checked our packs. One of my bedroll straps was untied. I knew I had tied it clean that morning. Inside the roll lay a strip of rawhide that was not mine, braided and stiff, with a knot in the shape of a small hand. I held it up. "Who has been in my gear?" I asked. Nobody answered. I threw the strip into the coals. The fire flared and then settled. A smell rose that made my stomach twist. Not meat, not hair. Something thin and sharp like burning horn. Miguel covered his nose and stepped away. Ephraim came over with eyes rimmed red. "I heard my mother's voice at the pass," he said. "It said my name the way she used to when I was late to supper. It used a word only she used." He looked at me, searching. I shook my head. "You did right not to answer?" He nodded and stared at the fire. "I do not think it is after the cattle," he said. "It wants us." I did not argue because I felt the same. After we ate, Caleb gathered us. "We do not split," he said. "If someone wanders, we tie him off. We keep a count every hour. We do not call out. We do not speak names after sunfall. If it comes close, I shoot first. You follow only at my word." He turned to Jesse. "You take first watch with me." Jesse lifted his chin and said, "Fine." Night fell fast and clean. The cottonwood stood like a black fork against the stars. We banked the fire and left only a small glow for the coffee. The herd settled quicker than I expected. That did not comfort me. I lay on my bedroll with my boots on and the rifle across my chest. The ground held a faint tremble, like the echo of hooves too far away to hear. I kept still and felt it pass through me and fade. A voice came from behind the cottonwood. It was my own voice. It said, "Water," in my tone and cadence. I stared at the tree and saw nothing. The voice said, "Thirst," in the same way I would. Then it said my name in a perfect match. Jesse started to stand. Caleb grabbed his sleeve and pulled him down. The voice shifted into Caleb's tone and asked for a light. Then it tried old Tom's slow, careful speech and told us to move the herd now. The cattle stirred but did not bolt. My mouth filled with a bitter taste. I breathed through it and held my place. Something crawled down the split trunk, slow and deliberate, keeping to the shadow. It hung there by hands and feet and turned its head toward us. The missing toe showed when it shifted weight. The arms were too long. The chest was too narrow. It climbed down to the ground and walked to the edge of the firelight without stepping in. We all saw it. No one spoke. It crouched and studied us with its head perfectly still. Then it rose and walked around the camp in a slow circle, never breaking the same distance, never changing pace. On each pass, it looked at a different one of us and held the gaze for a count of 5. When it looked at me, I felt a pressure in my ears and a heat behind my eyes. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. On the 4th circle, it stopped behind Ephraim and leaned closer, not touching him. He did not move. His hands were clenched at his sides. It breathed in and out once, shallow and fast, and then said his mother's name in a flat tone. He shuddered, but stayed. It waited as if expecting an answer. When none came, it let out a sound that held no shape and then walked to the cottonwood and climbed back into the dark. The ground tremble returned, stronger now, and with it came a low clicking from many points around the flat. The sound moved in and out as if a group shifted in place just beyond the light. I counted 6 distinct clicks, then 8, then lost the count. Old Tom's face looked drawn. He whispered, "It is not alone." Caleb raised his rifle and aimed into the dark and kept it there. My arm started to shake from holding the rifle on my chest. I rolled to my side to ease it and kept my eyes on the edge. The clicking stopped. A single sharp crack sounded near the cottonwood, like a knuckle popping. Then a voice said, clear as day, "Jesse." It matched Caleb's tone. Jesse twitched. The voice said, "Come help with the rope," and placed the stress in the words exactly as Caleb would. Jesse jerked his arm free of Caleb's grip and took a step. Caleb lunged and tackled him around the waist. They hit the ground hard. The voice laughed, not human, not animal, just short bursts that held no breath. My heart hammered. I raised the rifle and waited for it to cross the line. It did not. It stayed in the dark and kept repeating Jesse's name with small changes, testing vowel by vowel as if training itself. Jesse fought Caleb and cursed. "Let go," he said. "He needs me." Caleb held on and said nothing. Old Tom moved to Jesse's head and pressed his palm over Jesse's mouth. "Breathe through your nose," he whispered. "Think of the herd at dawn. Think of the count." Jesse stopped fighting inch by inch. His breath slowed. The voice went quiet. The night pressed in again. We waited for the next move, and I knew it was making a plan the same as we were. The night stretched long after that. None of us slept. The fire sank to embers, and the cold crept up from the ground. Every few minutes, one of the cattle snorted or shifted, but they didn't bolt again. That was worse. They stood too still, like they were listening. The cottonwood swayed without wind. The stars above it looked sharp enough to cut. When dawn came, it did so slow, gray first, then pale yellow that felt weak on the skin. Jesse sat apart from us with his head in his hands. His lips were dry, cracked white. Caleb crouched by him. "You keep your eyes open today," he said. "It talked through your ears last night. Don't let it talk through your head next." Jesse nodded but didn't answer. We counted the herd, still 83. But the one with the cut side lay on its belly and didn't get up. When we turned it over, its eyes were gone. The skin had been peeled around them as if by a knife, and the sockets were black, clean, and dry. No flies, no blood. I could see right through the hole at the back of one and out the other side to the sky. Miguel muttered a prayer. Caleb ordered the carcass dragged away. "Burn it," he said. "We leave no scent of death for it to follow." While we burned the steer, Ephraim wandered to the cottonwood. He stared at the bark where the thing had climbed. "There's something carved here," he said. We joined him. The trunk had scratches deep enough to catch a finger. 5 tall lines, one short, grouped together, and another set beside them. It looked like a count. 9 marks in all. I checked our group. 6 men, 2 mules, 1 wagon. 9. Old Tom's jaw tightened. "It's keeping score," he said. "It knows what belongs to us." Caleb turned to the herd. "Then we leave the count behind. We move fast and don't stop till the river." We drove the herd out of the flat and into open rock. The sun climbed hot by mid-morning, but the air felt heavy. I watched the horizon for movement, but nothing stirred. Hours passed. The sound of the hooves started to dull, swallowed by something that wasn't wind. When we stopped for a meal, even the tin plates sounded muffled when they touched. Ephraim said his ears rang. Jesse said he couldn't hear his own breath. I tried to listen for my heartbeat and couldn't. We reached a wide canyon by afternoon. The walls were high and red, carved by water long gone. The bottom held a stream, shallow but moving. Caleb said we'd follow it north toward the Green River. "We stay in the open," he said. "It doesn't like that." He didn't explain how he knew. The stream tasted clean. I filled my canteen and rinsed my face. The cold helped. Miguel refused to drink. He said the water carried echoes. I thought it was just nerves until I noticed small ripples moving against the current near the bend. They formed rings around nothing. Old Tom rode ahead to check the path. When he didn't return after 20 minutes, Caleb told me to follow. I found his mule first, reins dragging in the dust. The saddle was still warm. No tracks nearby but ours. I called his name once, quiet, and stopped when my own voice bounced back wrong. It came back slower, deeper, like someone had said it behind me. I drew the rifle and turned. The canyon was still. The walls rose close, the air caught between them like breath held too long. I took a step backward toward the mule. Something dropped from the ledge above, a small clump of dirt, then another. I looked up. At the rim, a figure crouched, bent forward on hands and feet. Its limbs moved with a rhythm too smooth for bone. It tilted its head, and the skin of the face caught the light wrong. Not fur, not hide, something stretched thin. It watched me for a long moment, then slipped over the edge without sound. I ran the mule back to camp. The others saw my face and didn't ask. Caleb looked up at the cliffs and said, "We move faster." We left the stream and took the high ridge where nothing could stand above us. The sun beat down and baked the ground to cracks. The herd slowed. One cow stumbled and didn't rise. Caleb didn't stop for it. By late afternoon, the heat faded and the shadows stretched long and thin. We reached a plateau with a line of low boulders that made a half circle. Beyond that was a drop into another canyon, deep and black. The air rose cold from below. Caleb said we'd camp there for the night, open ground on one side, a cliff on the other. "Safer," he said. We gathered what dry brush we could find and made a small fire. No one spoke much. Miguel hummed under his breath, something soft and low, just to have sound. Jesse cleaned his revolver over and over. Ephraim kept rubbing his wrist where the rope had burned him. Caleb stared at the cliff edge as if expecting something to climb it. As dark came, the wind shifted. It carried the faint smell of iron. Not blood exactly, but close. I kept looking at the fire, at the shadows it threw. They didn't fall right. My own shadow stretched longer than it should have, bending toward the canyon. A noise came from below us. At first I thought it was wind, then I realized it was breath. Slow, heavy, climbing. We all heard it. Caleb whispered, "Hold the line." He stood, rifle ready. The sound grew clearer. A hand appeared over the edge, pale, long fingers spread wide, nails dark. Another hand gripped beside it, then an arm, then a head. It pulled itself up in silence, the way a spider might. Its eyes reflected nothing. Its mouth didn't move. It stood on the edge and straightened, too tall, its spine shifting under the skin. Ephraim let out a sound between a gasp and a prayer. The thing tilted its head toward him. It took a step closer, and I saw that its feet were wrong. The toes pointed backward. It stopped and sniffed the air like it was tasting us. Caleb raised his rifle. "Stay back," he said. The thing didn't. It moved closer, slow and steady. He fired once, the sound sharp and short. The figure jerked, stumbled, then steadied. No blood came. It smiled, not with the mouth, but with the skin stretching at the sides of the face. Miguel grabbed a burning branch and threw it. The fire hit its chest and rolled off. The smell that followed was like singed bone. It didn't flinch. Caleb fired again. This time it dropped to one knee. Jesse stepped forward and fired twice more. When the smoke cleared, the ledge was empty. Only the scrape marks of its feet showed near the edge. We stood still for what felt like an hour. The cattle shifted but didn't panic. Caleb reloaded and said, "It's not dead." He wasn't asking. He looked at us each in turn. "We keep the fire going till sunrise. Nobody sleeps." We did as he said. The night passed slow, each of us watching the other's faces for any change. Around midnight, I heard a faint sound under the ground, a knocking from deep below, spaced like a heartbeat. Jesse heard it too. He mouthed, "It's under us." I couldn't argue. When dawn came again, the sky was dull and heavy. The fire had burned down to ash, no sign of it near the edge. But the prints that led away from the cliff now circled the herd, wide and deliberate. In the dust, the handprints showed again, each one turned inward. We counted 9 of them this time, one for each of us, including the ones gone. Caleb said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "We ride." We left the plateau and moved toward the river, faster than the cattle liked. The air grew colder, though the sun was high. Around noon, I saw something far behind us, a dark figure walking our path, keeping even pace. It never stumbled, never bent, just moved in a straight line. I told Caleb. He didn't turn around. "Don't look at it again," he said. "It follows sight. You feed it by seeing it." By late afternoon, the land began to dip. The river should have been close, but the horizon ahead looked wrong, bent in places where it should have been flat. Ephraim started muttering under his breath. Jesse said, "It's driving us somewhere." Miguel whispered, "To count again." That night, when we camped near a dry wash, the sound came back, a long, low whistle that circled us. Then words, my own voice first, then Caleb's, then Jesse's, screaming his own name. We all froze. The fire guttered out on its own. The dark closed over us like a blanket, and from that dark came the sound of hooves that didn't belong to our herd, slow, deliberate, heavy. Caleb whispered, "Don't move." I didn't. No one did. The hooves came closer. A shadow passed between us and the stars. I felt its breath, warm, wet, too close. Something brushed my shoulder, then the ground shook as if it leapt away. We sat in silence until morning. When the light came, Jesse was gone. His bedroll lay open, but no prints led away. Just one long hand mark in the dust beside where he'd been. Caleb stared at it for a long time, then said, "We finished the drive." No matter what. We saddled up. None of us spoke. The cattle moved quiet. The sun rose cold, and I could feel the count behind us growing shorter. By the third day after Jesse vanished, we were down to 5 men. No one said his name again. It was as if we had agreed without words that to speak it was to invite the thing closer. The herd followed the trail without protest. They didn't wander anymore, didn't bunch or balk at shadows. They just moved, heads low, eyes dull. It made the land feel hollow. Caleb rode ahead most of the time. He checked the compass often, though the direction was clear. He looked thinner, harder. His words had turned short, every order a number or a gesture. Miguel talked less. He'd stopped humming. Ephraim whispered sometimes when he thought no one could hear, saying prayers in a steady loop that never quite matched any I knew. The country changed again. The red stone gave way to gray shale, broken and sharp. The hooves of the cattle clicked over it like glass. By afternoon, we reached a long, dry basin. At the far end, a black hill rose out of the flat. The top looked carved by hand, smooth and unnatural against the horizon. Old Tom said, "That's the mesa they warn about in Bluff, the one the herders won't pass at night." Caleb shaded his eyes. "We're not stopping," he said. "The river lies beyond it." We skirted the hill on the western edge, keeping to the light. The smell returned, thin, sour, and old. It came in gusts, then faded. I thought it might be the carcasses of old cattle until I saw no bones anywhere. Nothing dead lived here long. As the sun sank, we looked for a place to camp. The basin held no trees, no shelter. Only rock and small weeds that broke under the hand. Miguel wanted to keep riding through the dark, but the cattle had slowed too much. Caleb chose a flat ridge near the hill. "We make a small fire," he said. Enough to see, not enough to call it. We built it low and wide with what brush we had. The flames barely reached my knees. The heat felt thin. Old Tom checked the perimeter and came back pale. "There's writing on the rock," he said. "New, not wind-made." We followed him. On the slope beside the fire, lines had been carved into the surface. At first I thought it was Navajo or Ute, but it wasn't words, it was shapes. Stick bodies, long arms, hollow heads. 9 of them again, drawn in a circle. Miguel stepped back and crossed himself. Caleb stared at it without blinking. "It wants to show us something," he said. "Don't let it." He kicked dust over the carvings until they blurred. The sound that came from the rock as he did made the hair stand up on my arms, a dry, high pitch, like a cry that couldn't get out. Night came early. The fire cast light that felt smaller than usual, as if the dark had weight. We sat close to it. No one touched food. The cattle stood silent beyond the circle, their shapes shifting at the edge of vision. After an hour, Ephraim said he heard something from the hill, a soft clicking, like stones tapped together. Caleb told him to ignore it. It grew louder anyway. Then we all heard it, steady, deliberate, moving down the slope toward us. I gripped my rifle. The sound stopped just past the light. We waited. Then a voice spoke. It was Jesse's. "It's cold out here," it said. "Let me in." Ephraim started to rise. Caleb grabbed his arm. "Don't move," he whispered. The voice came again, this time weaker, pleading. "Please, I'm hurt." The shape stepped into the firelight. It had Jesse's clothes, torn at the shoulder. His face was pale and wrong. The eyes were black holes, deep and wet. The mouth moved too slow for the words that came out. "You left me," it said. The sound was flat, like it came from a hollow space. Miguel screamed and threw a burning stick. It hit the thing's chest and passed through as if through smoke. The figure staggered and flickered. There was no other word for it, fading and returning in small jerks. The voice changed to Caleb's, then mine, then all of ours at once. It said, "Count again." Caleb fired. The shot hit center. The thing fell back and broke apart into a heap that looked like black sand. The firelight touched it, and it began to spread outward across the ground like spilled ink. The dark at the edges of the camp thickened and pulsed. I saw movement inside it, many shapes now, crawling low. "Mount up," Caleb shouted. "Drive them." We kicked dirt on the fire and turned the herd. The cattle bolted without hesitation, running as if they knew the way. We followed through the flat, the hooves pounding like thunder in a closed room. Behind us came a sound that rose higher and higher until it hit something past human hearing. Ephraim cried out. I looked back and saw the hill alive with shapes, tall and bent, crawling down its side in silence. The starlight showed their backs arched and limbs long as fence rails. They moved in unison, no pause, no sound but the scraping of stone under weight. We rode until the ground began to drop. The smell of water reached us faintly. "The river," I said. Caleb didn't answer. We drove the cattle down a narrow slope. Rocks cut the hooves and ours too, but we didn't slow. The river shimmered faintly ahead. When we reached it, Caleb shouted for us to cross. The herd plunged in, the current fast and shallow. Halfway across, the water began to ripple against the flow. Not from wind, from pressure, from movement under it. The cattle pushed harder. Something brushed my boot under the surface. I fired a shot into the dark water. The ripple stopped. We reached the far side as the first light of dawn touched the cliffs. The river looked calm behind us. Nothing followed. The herd stood shaking, dripping, but alive. I counted quickly. 72, 11 gone. Caleb rode back to the bank and watched the water. Old Tom joined him. "You think it can cross?" Tom asked. Caleb said, "Not while we move." He turned to us. "We don't stop till Green River Station. If we make it there, we don't tell a soul what we saw. We leave this ground behind." We rode north. The land flattened, and the smell of grass returned. It should have felt like relief, but none of us spoke. By midday, the cattle began to bellow again, low and restless, like they remembered something. When we stopped to rest, Ephraim asked, "What if it never needed the land? What if it just needed us to know it?" Caleb didn't answer. Miguel crossed himself again and faced south toward the ridge we'd left. I followed his gaze. Far in the distance, on the far bank of the river, I saw a figure standing still. Too far to see a face, but tall, shoulders narrow, arms long. It watched until the heat shimmer hit it. We reached the rail stop 3 days later. Sold the cattle to a buyer who asked no questions. We spent one night in town, then went our separate ways. Caleb left first, heading east. Miguel said he'd never ride that trail again. Ephraim went north toward Salt Lake. I stayed one more night in a small room above the store, trying to sleep. When I woke before dawn, I heard someone outside my door whisper my name. Not loud, not urgent, just patient. I held still, heart beating slow, waiting for it to pass. It did. I never opened the door. That was 50 years ago. I haven't set foot in Utah since. But sometimes, on still nights when the wind drops and the world goes quiet, I swear I can hear the clicking again. And I know the count isn't finished.